Far from here, on a world the colour of rust and old roses, a mountain rises so slowly into the pink-gold sky that you would never see it begin or end. Its lower slopes melt into a plain of fine red dust, and its summit floats near the edge of the thin air, almost where the darkness of space starts to show. No sound reaches up there, no wind strong enough to be heard, no bird song, no distant traffic of any living thing. Only a patient incline resting under the same faint sunlight for longer than there have been forests on Earth. This is Olympus Mons, the tallest known volcano in the solar system, standing on the surface of Mars. And tonight you do not need to climb it. You do not need to remember its height, or hold on to a single number, or follow any thread too tightly. Let your shoulders grow soft against whatever holds them, and let the breath move on its own, slow and unbothered. The ideas here will pass by like dust settling on a far-off slope, and whatever stays in the mind stays gently. Whatever fades, fades without loss. There is nothing to study here, only this dark sky and a mountain that has all the time in the world. Picture, first, just how immense it is. If you stood at the very centre of Olympus Mons and tried to look toward its edge, the rest of the mountain would curve away from you, falling below the horizon, hidden by the roundness of Mars itself. The base is so broad that it would cover almost the whole of a country, spreading some 600 kilometers across, a region roughly the size of Arizona, or close to the area of all the islands of the British Isles laid side by side. To cross that base on a straight road, if one existed, would take the better part of a day's driving. It is less a peak than a continent of stone that happens to lean a little toward the sky, and a single glance could never gather it in. The eye would lose its far edge in the haze, the way it loses the far shore of a very wide sea, and the mind, reaching for the whole of it, finds only more slope, more dust, more rise fading softly into distance. That broad spread comes with a strange softness of slope. For all its size, Olympus Mons is not steep and jagged the way the great mountains of Earth tend to be. Its sides climb at a shallow angle, on average only about 5 degrees from level, gentler in places still, the kind of incline you might mistake for flat ground while standing on it. There would be no scrambling here, no sheer faces, no need of rope or pick, just a long, even rise, like the faintest tilt of a vast floor. Set walking up its flank, you could travel for hours and feel almost no climb at all, only an endless tilted plane reaching onward. The mountain is colossal in breadth, and tender in pitch, powerful the way a slow tide is powerful, without ever seeming to rush. Now lift your eyes to its true height. From the plains around it, Olympus Mons reaches some 22 kilometers into the Martian sky, roughly 2.5 times the height of Mount Everest measured from sea level. Stack nearly 3 Everests one atop another, and you would only begin to approach its summit. A passenger jet on Earth cruises at perhaps 10 or 11 kilometers. The peak of this mountain stands more than twice as high again, so that an aircraft at its usual altitude would still be climbing for a long while to clear the top. Its uppermost reaches push toward the very top of the planet's thin atmosphere, into air so sparse it is barely there at all. The peak almost touches the threshold of space, a high place where the sky looks less blue and more like soft black. There is something restful in how it hides that scale. Stand at the foot of this mountain and you would not even sense it as a mountain. The rise would be so wide and so gradual that it would vanish into the curve of the world, and you would simply see reddish ground stretching toward a hazy horizon, perhaps a long, low swell in the far distance, nothing more. And because the world itself is smaller than Earth, its horizon draws in closer, so the far rise of the mountain would slip out of view all the sooner, hidden behind the near curve of the ground. The greatness of Olympus Mons folds itself away inside its own size. It is too big to be seen as big. The largest things often wear their bigness lightly, asking nothing of anyone, simply being. At the very top, the mountain does not come to a point. Instead, it opens. The summit holds an isthmus hollow called a caldera, a sunken complex of overlapping pits where the ground once dropped inward after great chambers of molten rock drained away beneath it. This central depression spans about 60 to 80 kilometers across, wide enough to swallow a major city and most of its suburbs, a bowl of shadow and terraced cliffs resting on the roof of the world. Standing at its rim, if any traveller ever could, you would look across a basin so broad that the far wall would be only a faint line in the distance, softened by the pale Martian air. These pits were not made all at once. They formed in stages, one collapse layered over another across long stretches of time, each new sinking leaving a curved step in the floor. There seemed to be several overlapping bowls in all, of different sizes and depths, their rims crossing and interrupting one another where one collapse cut into the last. The deepest of them sinks a few kilometers below the rim, a drop as great as the height of many an earthly mountain, yet so gently sloped that standing within it, you might cross its floor for an hour and feel only the faintest rise underfoot, the encircling wall climbing away so slowly it would seem less a cliff than the soft bending up of the ground at the world's edge. The result is a nested set of rings and ledges, like the faint imprints of many breaths the mountain once took and let go. To look down into them is to read a history written in stone, where every terrace marks a moment the fires below grew still and the ground eased a little lower. The whole summit is a record of settling, of weight finding a place to lie down. Around the entire base runs something stranger still, a great cliff, a steep outer edge where the volcano's flank ends abruptly and drops away to the plains below. This rampart stands several kilometers tall in places, in some stretches as much as 6 or 7, a sheer wall of rock wrapping almost all the way around the mountain like a boundary set between the volcano and the world beyond it. No one is certain how it formed, whether from ancient landslides that sheared away the outer flank, or the slow flow of lava reaching its outermost limit and cooling into a lip, or the long erosion of softer ground beneath. It is one of the puzzles of the place, a feature so large and so unusual that the worlds we know offer little to compare it to. It gives Olympus Mons the look of an island, a high plateau lifted above a moat of dust, set apart from the plains as cleanly as a table stands above the floor, so the shape of this place comes together behind closed eyes, too wide to see across, too gradual to feel underfoot, crowned with a sunken bowl of overlapping shadows edged by that high wall. It is the largest volcano ever found anywhere on any world studied so far. Nothing on Earth comes close. To picture it fully, the mind has to stretch out past the familiar size of things, into a larger and easier sense of scale, until the ordinary measures fall away and only the vast soft shape remains. Such a mountain could grow here and nowhere on our own world, and the reason lies in a stillness Mars keeps in its crust. Earth's outer shell is broken into great moving plates that slide and drift over the ages, carrying the ground slowly along as if on an unhurried conveyor, a few centimeters a year, about as fast as a fingernail grows. On Mars, that motion seems to have stopped long ago, or perhaps never truly began. The Martian crust is thought to be a single unbroken shell, one continuous plate wrapping the whole globe, fixed in place above the heat below. Whatever rises from the depths to build upon it stays exactly where it was set down, age after age, with nothing to carry it off. That fixity makes all the difference for a volcano. On Earth, a rising plume of hot rock might build a volcano, but the moving plate above drags that volcano away from its source, so the heat must start a new peak farther along. Over time, this strings out a chain of islands or mountains, each one cut off from the fire that made it, each in turn carried away and going cold. The Hawaiian Islands show it plainly, a long line of volcanoes and undersea peaks marching across the ocean floor, with the living, erupting island at one end, and a trail of older, sinking, quieting ones reaching back the other way, each borne over the same buried source and then carried off and gently silenced. No single one of them can grow without limit, because the ground beneath it never stops travelling, bearing it slowly away from the heat that fed it, before it has time to grow truly vast. On Mars, the ground stayed put, so when a column of warmth rose from deep within the planet and broke the surface, the volcano it fed could remain fixed above that source for an immense span of time. Eruption after eruption, layer upon layer, the lava poured out over the same fixed spot, building higher and wider with nothing to interrupt the work. Instead of a scattered chain, all that volcanic material gathered into one place, into a single growing giant. Olympus Mons is, in a sense, every Hawaiian island fused into one and allowed to rise without ever being pulled aside. There is a tenderness in imagining that long undisturbed making. No sudden cataclysm raised this mountain in a night. It grew the way certain slow things grow, through repetition and patience, one outpouring at a time, across hundreds of millions of years, perhaps across more than 1 billion. The fires would wake, spill their slow rivers of molten rock down the easy slopes, and sleep again, then stir once more after long silence, adding another thin sheet of stone to the immense pile. Eruption and rest. Eruption and rest. The same unhurried rhythm kept for an age longer than any creature has lived on Earth. The eruptions that shaped it were not the explosive, violent kind we sometimes picture, the towering ash clouds and the bursting peaks. Olympus Mons is a shield volcano, named for its broad, rounded profile, like a warrior's shield laid flat upon the ground. Shield volcanoes are built by runny, free-flowing lava that spreads far before it cools, rather than by thick, sticky magma that traps its gases and bursts and shatters. Their lava is more like a slow flood than a fountain. It wells up and runs out and creeps downhill, glowing, and where it stops it simply hardens. So the Martian giant most likely grew through long floods of liquid rock, sheet after sheet creeping outward over the land, hardening into wide, smooth aprons of stone, each new flow paving over the last. Its size speaks not of fury, but of persistence, of vast quantities of lava released calmly over unimaginable lengths of time. Lower gravity helped too. Mars pulls on things with only about 1/3 of Earth's strength, so a person who weighs 100 pounds here would weigh under 40 there, and a mountain can stand taller before its own weight begins to crush and flatten its base. On our heavier world, a peak of such height might slowly sink into the ground beneath it, sagging under its own mass, the rock at its foundation yielding like soft clay under too great a load. But the lighter touch of Mars lets the rock hold its shape, letting the volcano climb to heights that would be unstable here. The mountain is, in part, a gift of that gentler pull, a structure made possible by a softer hand at its foundation, lifted higher because the world beneath it asked less of it. The lava itself would have moved in a particular way under that lighter gravity and that distant sun. Pulled less strongly downhill and cooling slowly in the thin, cold air, the flows could travel farther before stopping, stretching out into long tongues of stone that reached far across the plains, far longer than most flows that harden on Earth. Some of those old flows are still faintly visible from orbit, frozen mid-journey, their lobed fronts and wrinkled surfaces preserved in the dry, cold air. They lie there like the ghosts of slow rivers, every ripple and fold held exactly where it cooled, untouched by the rains and frosts that would long ago have softened and buried them on a wetter, warmer world. In places, the whole flank of the mountain is a still photograph of motion long since ended, a river caught in the act of flowing and never released. Think of the silence in which all this happened. During much of the building of Olympus Mons, the lava itself was among the few things stirring on the surface. No oceans crashed, no forests sighed in the wind, no cities hummed. Only the slow seep and spread of molten stone, glowing dully in the dim daylight, and then the long cooling, and then nothing. The mountain was raised by a process more like a held breath than a shout, and that thought alone can settle the chest, slow and easy. Its age deepens the feeling. The main structure was built across an era when Mars ran far more volcanically alive than it is now. Yet some parts of its surface are, geologically speaking, surprisingly young. Certain lava flows near the summit appear to have hardened only a few million years ago, which on the calendar of planets is almost recent. This hints that Olympus Mons may not be wholly dead, only deeply asleep, capable in principle of stirring again after a silence longer than the whole of human history. So the image arrives of a sleeping giant, not extinct perhaps, only dormant, its fires banked low beneath kilometres of cooled rock. It does not need to do anything to be remarkable. It rests, immense and patient, on a cold red plain, waiting through ages no one is counting. There is a kindness in that, in something so powerful choosing only stillness, holding its strength easily, asking nothing of the empty sky above. Nothing here is in any hurry, and your own breathing can slow to meet it. Drift a little higher now, into the strange thin sky that wraps the mountain's upper slopes. The air on Mars is already faint, only 1/100th as dense as the air you're breathing, a tenuous veil of mostly carbon dioxide. But at the summit of Olympus Mons, more than 20 kilometres up, even that thin air has mostly fallen away below. The pressure at the peak is just a small fraction of the already low pressure at the surface, perhaps 1/10th of it. To stand there would be to stand almost where atmosphere fades into the near vacuum of space, in a hush so deep that even the faint Martian wind would barely brush your skin. In that rarefied height, the sky overhead would not be the warm butterscotch of the lowlands. With so little dust hanging above the summit, the heavens darken to a deep indigo that shades toward black, and stars can glimmer faintly even in daytime. The summit is one of the few places on any solid world where you could stand on rock and feel yourself almost beyond the planet altogether, the curve of Mars dropping away beneath your feet, the cosmos pressing close. It is a doorway place, a balcony at the very edge of a world hung between ground and void. Lower down, around the mountain's wide shoulders, the weather of Mars still gathers, and it does so in a recurring, almost tidal way. Clouds of water ice form along the flanks, especially in certain seasons, thickening as moisture in the thin air is pushed upward and cools against the rising slopes, the same way clouds gather against a tall mountainside on Earth. From orbit, these wispy white clouds have been seen wrapping the great volcano like a scarf, sometimes streaming out from its western flank in a long plume that reaches for hundreds of kilometres downwind, blurring its outline, draping the immense rock in a thin gauze of frost-bright vapour. The largest mountain we know sometimes wears a veil of cloud, as if even it likes to be half hidden now and then. The clouds tend to bloom in the Martian afternoon, as the warming ground sends air climbing up the mountainsides, then thin away again as the day cools. A daily rhythm of mist has continued on those slopes, unseen and uncelebrated for ages. No one is there to watch them form, yet they form all the same, faithful to the steady physics of the place. Somewhere on Mars in this very moment, a pale cloud may be gathering against the side of Olympus Mons, and dissolving and gathering once more. The colours of the mountain shift with the light of the Martian day. In the low sun of morning or evening, the rust-red dust glows with warm ochre and amber, the long shadows of ridges and old lava channels stretching across the slopes. At midday, under the small distant sun, the surface pales to a softer tan and the shadows grow shy. The whole mountain is a slowly turning canvas of reds and browns and dusty golds, repainted hour by hour by a sun that looks smaller in the sky than the one you know, its light a little thinner, a little kinder on the eyes. That smaller sun is part of the dreamlike feel of standing in imagination on such a world. Mars orbits much farther out than Earth, half again as far from the sun, so from its surface the sun appears only about 2/3 as wide as the one we know, and gives only a little more than 1/3 as much warmth and light. Daylight on Mars is a paler thing, a softened glow rather than a blaze, never as bright as a clear noon on Earth, closer perhaps to the light of an overcast afternoon. On the high slopes of Olympus Mons, that muted light falls across the dust and stone like a perpetual late afternoon, a long, low hush that never quite becomes noon. It is a light made for stillness, for slow looking, for rest. When the sun does set on Mars, it does something tender and unexpected. The Martian sunset glows blue, while the daytime sky leans toward pink and orange because of the fine dust that scatters reddish light. The region right around the sinking sun takes on a cool, bluish halo, the very opposite of the warm sunsets of Earth. Fine particles in the air scatter the light their own way, letting the blue gather close to the sun as it goes down. So on the lower flanks of Olympus Mons at the close of a Martian day, you might watch the sun fade inside a soft blue glow, sinking at last into a dusky, rose-tinted sky. A day on Mars, one full turn of the planet, is gently familiar. It lasts about 24 hours and 39 minutes, only a little longer than a day on Earth. So the sun rises and arcs and sets over Olympus Mons in a rhythm close to the one your own body knows, the slow procession of light and shadow that has shaped sleep and waking since long before there were clocks. There is comfort in that near match, a sense that even on so far and strange a world, the days would still have a pulse the heart could recognise, a tide of light not so different from the one carrying you towards sleep. The year, though, runs far longer. Mars takes nearly 2 Earth years, about 687 Earth days, to circle the Sun once, so its seasons stretch to almost double our own. Because its path around the Sun is more lopsided than Earth's, the seasons are uneven in length too, one stretch of the year noticeably longer than another. Winter lingers, summer lingers, each a long, unhurried season that takes its time to arrive and its time to leave. The mountain has stood through hundreds of millions of these long Martian years, watching the polar caps grow and shrink, the dust seasons come and go, the faint clouds gather and disperse. It keeps a slower calendar than we do, marking time not in days or even years, but in eons. Through all those seasons, the temperature on the mountain holds profoundly cold. Mars is a frigid world. Even on a summer afternoon at its warm equator, the ground may rise only a little above freezing, and by night the cold plunges far below anything an earthly winter knows, often 100 degrees or more beneath freezing. On the high slopes of Olympus Mons, lifted so far above the warming ground, the cold runs deeper still, dry and motionless, with no wind to sharpen it, and no moisture to make it bite. Only a wide chill resting over everything. That cold has held the mountain unchanged for ages, preserving its slopes, freezing its old lava flows in place, keeping the great volcano in a kind of timeless suspension, a clear, dry chill in which nothing alters and nothing decays. Come back down to the ground itself, to the very texture of the surface. Much of Olympus Mons lies under a fine, soft dust, a powder of ancient weathered rock spread over the slopes like a thin reddish snow. This dust is extraordinarily fine, finer than talcum powder, its particles smaller than the flour in a kitchen, ground down over ages by the slow workings of the Martian world. So light is it that the gentlest breath of wind lifts it into the air, where it can hang for a long time, tinting the sky and blurring every distant edge. It settles on everything, working into seams and joints, coating the solar panels of landers until their light grows dim. The mountain wears a coat of powder so delicate that a single footstep, if anyone ever made one, would print itself cleanly and might remain unblurred for a very long time, as the boot prints left on our own moon have stayed crisp for decades. The redness of that dust, the colour that defines all of Mars, comes from iron. The Martian soil is rich in iron-bearing minerals, and over vast stretches of time that iron has rusted, reacting slowly with the small traces of oxygen and water the planet holds to form fine red oxides, the same kind of rust that reddens an old iron gate left out in the rain. It is a thin coating, really, a stain only a little way deep over a darker ground, yet it is enough to colour a whole world, for the winds have spread that rusted dust everywhere, working it into a fine, even bloom across the surface, so the entire planet, the great mountain included, is in a sense quietly rusting, painted in the warm tones of weathered metal. The red of Olympus Mons is the red of oxidation, the colour of slow chemistry working patiently across an entire world. It is a strange and beautiful thought that the famous colour of Mars is essentially the colour of rust, the same hue that creeps across forgotten tools and the hulls of old ships and the railings left too long in the rain. Earth keeps its rust in patches, in the corners and edges where iron meets damp air, a sign of neglect, of things left to weather. Mars wears that very colour everywhere, head to foot, an entire planet dressed in weathered iron, beautiful in it rather than spoiled. And Olympus Mons, the tallest peak of all, stands draped in that same warm russet, a mountain of rusted dust glowing under a faint sun. There is something humble in it, this grandest of volcanoes wearing so homely and familiar a colour, the colour of an old key, an old gate, an old nail. Beneath the dust, the mountain is made largely of basalt, the dark, dense rock that forms when runny lava cools. Basalt is the same stone that paves the floors of Earth's oceans and builds the Hawaiian Islands and the great lava plateaus of our own world. Hold a piece of it, and it is heavy in the hand, fine-grained and almost black, sometimes pocked with little bubbles where gas escaped as it set. So in its bones, Olympus Mons is built of rock we know well, a familiar grey-black stone, only piled here to a height and breadth Earth has never matched. The dust on top is rust red, but the body of the mountain, the true substance of it, is the cooled dark blood of an ancient planet. The same quiet stone that floors so many still places. Brush away that dust and look closely at the lava surfaces, and you might find them wrinkled and ropey, frozen in folds and coils. When fluid lava flows and slowly cools, a skin forms on top while the molten rock still creeps beneath, and that skin wrinkles and drags into smooth rounded ridges, the same coiled rope-like pattern that hardened basalt wears on the slopes of Hawaii. It is a texture made by motion, the record of a surface still moving as it's set. These folds are preserved across parts of the mountain, the fine fingerprints of flows that crept and stiffened long ago. Run a hand across them, in imagination, and you would feel the gentle waves of stone, every curve a memory of motion, every coil a moment when liquid rock paused and held still forever. In other places, the slopes are marked by long channels and tubes, the paths where lava once ran in confined streams. Sometimes the surface of a lava river crusts over, while the molten rock keeps flowing beneath, and when the flow finally drains away, it leaves a hollow tube behind, a natural tunnel running down through the stone. On Olympus Mons and across Mars, such lava tubes may lace the ground, empty corridors carved by fire and then abandoned to the dark. Some are thought to be broad enough to walk through, perhaps even large enough to shelter a small settlement one distant day. They are the mountain's hidden hollows, its inner passages. Those tubes hold a special interest for anyone who dreams of people one day visiting Mars. The surface lies exposed to harsh radiation from space, with little atmosphere and no magnetic shield to soften it, and the temperature swings sharply between the thin daylight and the deep cold of night. But inside a lava tube, beneath meters of solid rock, that radiation would drop away sharply, and the temperature would hold far steadier, the stone above and around acting like the thick walls of a cellar that stays cool in summer and mild in winter. Here and there along such tubes, the roof has fallen in, opening round skylights to the surface, so that an explorer might climb down through one of these openings into a sheltered hollow already roofed and walled by nature. These ancient volcanic tunnels, carved by the same fires that built Olympus Mons, might someday become natural shelters, ready-made caves where people could rest in safety. The mountain's old plumbing could become, in time, a refuge. For now, though, those passages lie empty and undisturbed, in a darkness unbroken for ages. No light has entered the deepest of them since the lava that made them cooled and stilled, and no sound and no breath of moving air. They wait in perfect blackness, in perfect silence, holding the same still cold for millions upon millions of years, neither growing nor decaying, nothing falling, nothing stirring, simply existing in the patient dark beneath the mountain's skin. There is a strange peace in the thought of such places, sealed and steady and utterly at rest. The mind can grow as quiet as one of those hidden tubes, untroubled, undisturbed. Olympus Mons does not stand alone. It rises near the edge of a great volcanic region of Mars, a broad swell of land lifted by countless eruptions, where several other immense volcanoes also stand. This raised province tilts a noticeable portion of the planet's surface upward, a place where the crust itself was heaved and built up by the heat, working below across long ages. The largest mountain we know belongs to a whole family of giants, gathered on one swollen shoulder of the world. 3 of its great neighbours stand in a row not far away, a trio of vast volcanoes lined across the rise like 3 sentinels keeping watch over the plains. Each of them, on its own, would dwarf anything on Earth, climbing many kilometres into the sky, yet together they form an almost orderly arrangement, evenly spaced along a single gentle line, as if some deep pattern in the crust had guided where the fires would break through. The 3 are so large and so aligned that early observers, peering from Earth, could mark their pale summits as a recognisable string across the disk of Mars. A map of this region shows a landscape of titans, several of the solar system's mightiest volcanoes clustered within view of one another, sharing the same high ground. Olympus Mons stands a little apart at the western edge, the grandest member of a remarkable gathering. That volcanic uplift is so massive it likely affected the entire planet. The whole bulging province rises kilometres above the surrounding land and spans thousands of kilometres across, a swelling so great that it makes up a noticeable fraction of the planet's surface. The sheer weight and bulk of all that piled rock may have shifted how Mars spins, and even, some think, tipped the whole crust slowly around over the ages so that this great load settled nearer the equator, where a spinning world prefers to carry its heaviest burden. To raise so much stone in one place is to nudge the planet itself, ever so slightly, into a new poise. The mountains did not merely sit upon Mars. In their making, they help to shape the very tilt and turn of the globe that holds them. The breath settles deeper at the thought that something so vast could grow without noise and still reshape a world. Stretching away from this raised region, the land bears other marks of that ancient strain. Not far from the great volcanoes, running eastward from the edge of the rise, lies an immense system of canyons, a network of deep valleys and branching chasms reaching for thousands of kilometres across the Martian surface. These chasms are thought to have opened partly as the crust stretched and cracked under the stress of all that volcanic uplift, the ground pulling apart and dropping along great faults, even as the mountains nearby pushed upward, the whole region strained by the weight and swelling of the rise. So the tallest peaks and the deepest canyons of Mars are 2 sides of one long story, the rising and the splitting bound together, born of the same slow stirring in the planet's depths. To lift a land so high in one place is to pull it apart in another, and the planet bears both marks at once. That canyon system is itself a marvel of scale, a vast trench far longer and deeper than any canyon on Earth, dwarfing even our own most famous gorges. It runs for some 4,000 kilometres, long enough to stretch across an entire continent, and in places it sinks several kilometres deep, far deeper than the Grand Canyon and many times its length. It cuts across a large fraction of the planet's circumference, a scar of shadow and layered rock so wide that cloud and mist can gather at one end while the other lies clear, the weather differing from one reach of it to the next. Standing in imagination on its rim, you would gaze across a gulf so deep that whole banks of cloud could drift along below your feet, the layered red walls dropping away in great terraced steps toward a shadowed floor far underneath. Mars holds extremes in both directions, the highest of mountains and the deepest of valleys, both lying under the same dusty sky, sharing the same long silence, the planet balanced between its great heights and its great depths. How can we know so much about a place no human has ever set foot upon? The answer is a story of patient watching from afar. For decades, spacecraft from Earth have journeyed to Mars and slipped into orbit around it, circling the planet over and over, their cameras turned downward toward the red surface. From those high, looping paths, they have mapped the great volcano in extraordinary detail, tracing every ridge and channel and the wide rings of its summit, all without ever touching the ground. The first close look came many years ago, when an early spacecraft slipped into orbit around Mars and found the whole planet shrouded in a vast dust storm, the surface hidden beneath a tan blank haze. For a time there was almost nothing to see, only the dust, and those who waited and watched could do little but wait on. Then a few dark spots appeared, poking up through the swirling murk, mysterious and unexplained, standing above the storm because they were so very high. As the dust slowly settled over the following weeks, the spots resolved into the summits of enormous volcanoes, Olympus Mons among them, their full shapes emerging little by little until it became clear that these were no ordinary features but mountains of staggering size, larger than anything yet imagined. The discovery unfolded the way a shape emerges from fog, gradually without alarm, a hidden grandeur revealing itself as the air grew clear. Since then, a succession of orbiters has refined that early picture with ever sharper eyes. Instruments have measured the mountain's height by bouncing laser pulses off its slopes, sending down a brief flash of light and timing to a tiny fraction of a second, how long it takes to return, then turning millions upon millions of such measurements into a precise map of its every contour. Other cameras have photographed its surface so finely that individual boulders, only a meter or two across, become visible, along with the smallest channels and folds, the texture of the mountain laid bare from hundreds of kilometers above. Bit by bit, pass by pass, observation by observation, the great volcano has been charted in meticulous detail, all through the steady gaze of machines circling quietly overhead. There is something deeply peaceful in that method of knowing, this gathering of light from far away. No one shouted, no one rushed, no boots ever crunched across that red dust. Instead, silent spacecraft kept their orbits, listening with cameras and lasers, gathering a little more with each slow pass, sending their findings home in faint streams of radio across the dark gulf between worlds, where people on Earth received them and studied them and pieced the mountain together in their minds, image by image, over years. The whole portrait of Olympus Mons that we now hold was assembled this way, from countless quiet signals crossing the emptiness, a careful looking that never once touched or troubled the thing it studied. The mountain gave up its shape to patience alone. Those signals travel a long, lonely road. Light and radio waves from Mars take several minutes to reach Earth, sometimes only a handful, sometimes more than 20, depending on where the two planets lie in their wide circling orbits. At their closest, Mars and Earth are separated by tens of millions of kilometers, and at their farthest by hundreds of millions, when the two worlds sit on opposite sides of the Sun, so the delay swells and shrinks across the months as they draw near and apart. So every image of Olympus Mons arrives a little late, having crossed that immense gulf at the speed of light, the fastest thing there is, and still needing minutes upon minutes to make the trip. Those who guide the orbiters have learned a kind of calm for it, sending a command and then waiting for the long round trip of the answer. The mountain you see in any picture is always, gently, a memory, its light set out toward us a little while ago and only now arriving. Reaching it asks for patience at every turn. Because both worlds move at different speeds in their orbits, the best moments to launch a spacecraft come only once every 26 months or so, when Earth and Mars are positioned just right for a fuel-saving path between them. Miss that window, and you must wait more than 2 years for the next. So every mission to study Olympus Mons has been an exercise in choosing the right slow moment, in flinging a craft along a long curving arc, and then waiting again for months as it coasts toward the red world. Patience is woven into the very act of reaching it. When the craft arrive, they do not land upon the great volcano. Olympus Mons is too high, too vast, its slopes and summit beyond the reach of the landers and rovers that have touched down on Mars so far. A craft coming into land needs thick enough air to slow it with a parachute, and at the mountain's great height the air is far too thin for that, so the summit lies above the reach of any safe descent. Those wheeled explorers have settled instead onto flatter, lower plains, gentler ground at the bottom of the world's air where a soft landing is possible. The mountain stays untouched by any human-made thing, studded only from the sky, its surface as pristine as the day each lava flow cooled. No rover has rolled across it, no lander has rested on its slopes, no wheel or footpad has ever marked its dust. It keeps its undisturbed quiet, watched from above but never once visited. Perhaps that is part of its peace. There is a kind of dignity in a place seen but never touched, known but never trodden, held in the mind without ever being marked by a footprint. Olympus Mons exists for us now mostly as an image, a shape in the imagination, a mountain you can carry inside without ever having stood upon it. It belongs to the realm of things contemplated rather than handled, like a distant star or a remembered dream. The heart can hold such things lightly, with wonder and no possession, simply glad that they are there. The mountain is old beyond easy imagining, its great bulk assembled over an era that began billions of years ago, when the young Mars still burned within a heat. To say a number is almost to lose the feeling, but the scale is this. The building of the mountain spans a stretch of time many times longer than the entire history of complex life on Earth. While it slowly rose, the first fish learned to crawl onto our land. The great forests of coal came and went. The age of the giant reptiles rose and ended, and whole lineages of creatures appeared and vanished, one after another, all in less time than this one mountain took to gather itself together. Every story you've ever heard of Earth's living past would fit, with room to spare, inside the lifetime of this single quiet slope. Its very oldest rocks may date back more than 3 billion years, to a time when Mars ran warmer and wetter, when liquid water may have pooled and flowed freely across its surface. In those distant ages the planet might have worn rivers winding to standing lakes, perhaps even a shallow sea spread across the northern lowlands. The air may have been thicker, able to hold a little warmth, and the red world we know today was a different kind of place, blue-skied perhaps, and damp. Olympus Mons began its long rise in that ancient warmth and has stood ever since, through the slow drying and the slow cooling of the whole planet, while the rivers vanished and the lakes froze and the air thinned away. It has watched Mars change from a possibly living-friendly world into the cold desert it is now, a witness to a planet's entire long fading. Such depths of time make the ordinary worries of a single day grow very small and soft. A human life, even a long one, is the briefest flicker against the standing of this mountain. A whole human history, every empire and invention and forgotten name, is only a thin recent layer atop its immense age. The peak was already old beyond reckoning when the first simple creatures stirred in Earth's young seas, and it will very likely still be standing long after we and all our works have passed into memory and beyond. There is no anxiety in that thought, only a kind of release, a permission to set down the small burdens of the moment. The mountain has stood untroubled for billions of years, indifferent to every passing storm, and against so vast a calm the worries of a single day weigh almost nothing at all. Even the way time is measured on Mars reflects this slower pace. Those who study Martian history have divided its vast past into long-named ages, broad epochs spanning hundreds of millions of years apiece, marked by the great changes the planet underwent: an early age of warmth and water, a middle age when the climate turned and great floods carved the land, and the long, dry, cold age that holds the planet now. Olympus Mons reaches across more than one of these ages, its buildings stretched over chapters of Martian history so long that each alone would contain the whole of recorded human time many times over. The mountain does not belong to a single moment. It spans whole eras, a structure laid down across the deep chapters of another world's biography. And yet parts of it are young. Among all that ancientness, certain surfaces near the summit and across the upper flanks bear the marks of much more recent flows, smooth and barely cratered, lava that the crater count suggests cooled and set in place no more than a few million years before now, some of it perhaps later still. By the patient measure of planets, a few million years is the blink of an eye, very nearly the present moment, a thin, fresh skin laid over depths of time beyond counting. This leaves open the gentlest of questions. Might the great volcano stir once more, in some far future age, long after we are gone, and add another thin sheet of stone to its immense pile? No one can say for certain. The giant only sleeps, and its sleep, however deep, may not be eternal. We read these ages partly by counting craters. Across the solar system, surfaces are slowly pelted by small impacts over time, and the longer a surface has lain exposed, the more little craters it gathers, like dust settling on an undisturbed shelf, or like a windshield gathering chips over the years of a long drive. The principle is simple and slow. A fresh surface starts clean, and the marks accumulate at a roughly steady pace, so the count becomes a kind of slow clock. By counting the craters on different parts of Olympus Mons, scientists estimate how long each region has lain undisturbed. The smoother, less cratered slopes are younger, freshly paved by lava. The more pockmarked areas are older, having waited longer beneath the gentle rain of impacts. The mountain wears its age in freckles, a slow record of time written across its skin. That same rain of small impacts falls everywhere on Mars, and on Olympus Mons it has been falling for ages, each tiny strike adding a faint mark. They come rarely by the measure of a single lifetime, perhaps not one to be seen in many human years across any one patch of ground. It is only over the immense reach of geological time that they gather into a countable freckling. None of them are violent in any frightening way. They are simply the slow weathering of an exposed world, the soft accumulation of time made visible. Over millions of years, these gentle peltings smooth and roughen and rework the surface in their own unhurried way, sculpting the mountain's face grain by grain. It is erosion by waiting, change so slow that within any single moment the mountain seems perfectly, eternally still. In truth, Mars erodes very gently now, far more gently than Earth. With almost no rain, no rivers to speak of, no crashing seas and only the thinnest of winds, the Martian surface changes at a pace that makes our own world seem frantic. Features that would wear away in a few million years on Earth can persist for billions of years on Mars, preserved in the cold, dry air. This is why the old lava flows of Olympus Mons remain so crisp, why its summit rings are still so clearly drawn. The mountain is held in a kind of deep preservation, a slowness so profound that the past stays visible, nearly untouched, across spans of time we can barely name. So Mars becomes a sort of museum of itself, a world where the ancient stays legible because so little disturbs it. On Earth, the restless plates and the endless weather erase the old and recycle it into the new, drowning it under sediment or melting it back into the depths, so that very ancient surfaces are rare and hard to find. Most of our planet's earliest face has long since been rubbed away. Mars has held still, and in holding still it has kept its early chapters open to read, whole landscapes billions of years old lying out in the open air barely changed. Olympus Mons is one of the grandest pages in that open book, a monument from the planet's youth still standing, still clear, its earliest lines as readable now as on the day they were written. The name itself reaches back to old stories. Olympus Mons is named for Mount Olympus, the legendary home of the gods in the ancient Greek tales, the highest peak of myth, wrapped in cloud and set apart from the world of mortals. It is a fitting borrowing, for this Martian giant is the loftiest mountain we know, a dwelling place worthy, in imagination, of something more than human. When the great volcano was confirmed and charted, that mythic name was given to it, linking a real peak on a distant planet to the oldest dreams of a sacred, untouchable height. But the tie to that name reaches further back than the spacecraft that mapped it. Long before any probe flew to Mars, astronomers peering through telescopes on Earth had noticed a faint bright spot in that very region of the planet, a pale marking they could just make out across the gulf. They could not see its true nature then, only a recurring patch of light, brighter than its surroundings, that appeared and reappeared as Mars turned. Not knowing it was a vast volcano, they gave that bright spot a name drawn from the same mythic mountain, sensing perhaps something special in that glowing place without yet knowing what it was. That bright patch was likely the summit of Olympus Mons catching the light, or its high slopes wreathed in pale water ice clouds, gleaming faintly through Earth's telescopes. The cloud-wrapped peak lifted above the dust would have stood out as a recurring pale spot whenever that face of Mars turned toward Earth, returning night after night, season after season, on the old observer's charts. So early stargazers, more than a century ago, were already gazing at the tallest mountain in the solar system without realizing it, marking it down as a small luminous mystery, the snows of Olympus, they sometimes called that glow. The mountain announced itself as a glimmer long before anyone understood its shape, a soft light from far away, hinting at grandeur, waiting quietly for the day it would finally be seen clearly. There is a tenderness in that, in being noticed first as a gentle shine. Pause on how recently, in the long view, this place came to be known at all. For most of human history, no one had any idea that such a mountain existed. The ancient peoples who named the Greek Olympus, the astronomers who first sketched Mars, the countless generations who looked up at that red point of light, none of them knew that it carried, on its surface, the greatest volcano in our solar neighbourhood. The full understanding of Olympus Mons is younger than many people alive today, a piece of knowledge gathered within a single lifetime, even as the mountain itself is older than the Earth's first forests. The word Mons, attached to its name, simply means mountain in Latin, the old language often used in naming features across the worlds of our solar system. So Olympus Mons reads, plainly, as the Mountain of Olympus, a quiet, dignified title carrying both the weight of ancient myth and the calm precision of science. There is a whole soft vocabulary of such words spread across the planets. A great canyon is a vallis, a low plain, a planitia, a small hill, a mons's lesser cousin, each Latin term marking a kind of place. Across the surface of Mars, countless features wear these names, a formal language laid gently over an alien land, as if to honour it. The naming itself is a kind of reaching out, a way of holding the unfamiliar in familiar words, of making a distant world a little more our own. The names given across Mars often carry this same gentle poetry. The plains, the valleys, the craters and the volcanoes wear titles drawn from old myths, from classical places, from the languages of many peoples, a soft tapestry of human memory spread across another world. A map of Mars reads like a quiet anthology of Earth stories, transplanted to red dust and silent slopes. Olympus Mons stands among them as the loftiest, the most fittingly named, crowned with the title of the god's own mountain, presiding in silence over a landscape woven from the dreams of a faraway species who looked up and wondered. That faraway species is, of course, ourselves, and our wondering about Mars stretches back through long ages of myth and story. The red planet has always drawn the human eye, its rusty glimmer in the night sky setting it apart from the white and golden stars. Many ancient cultures noticed that reddish wanderer and wove tales around it, and the very name Mars comes from a Roman god tied to that fierce red colour. Yet the world itself, we now know, is mostly a place of profound quiet, of soft dust and gentle slopes, and the largest, most peaceful mountain we have ever found. The old fierce stories and the calm reality drift side by side in the mind, both part of how we hold this distant world. That long human longing can rest easy now, softened into the quiet contentment of a wish partly fulfilled. Olympus Mons holds a singular title, for it is the largest volcano not only on Mars but in the entire solar system, as far as anyone has been able to discover. Across all the planets and moons we have studied, with their many volcanoes and mountains, none has been found to match this one for sheer combined height and breadth. There are worlds with their own fires, moons where ice erupts in place of rock, planets scarred by ancient lava, yet nowhere among them has anything been found to rival this single Martian giant. It reigns over a whole sun's worth of worlds, the greatest peak in our cosmic neighbourhood, unrivaled across the planets that circle our star. To hold that title is a quiet kind of supremacy. There are surely taller things imaginable somewhere in the wider universe, and the cosmos is vast enough to hide greater mountains on worlds no eye has ever seen, and no name has ever touched, on planets circling other stars beyond all our reaching. But within the reach of what we know, within the family of planets and moons we have managed to map and measure, Olympus Mons stands alone at the very top. To call it the tallest known, rather than simply the tallest, is to speak with the honesty of explorers, naming the greatest thing yet found while leaving the door open to the unknown beyond. Even that humility is restful, the sense of a universe still holding its secrets, still waiting, unhurried and unbothered, to be revealed a little at a time. It dwarfs the largest volcanoes of Earth so completely that comparison almost loses meaning. Our planet's grandest volcano rises from the deep floor of the Pacific and breaks the surface as a great island, and measured from its true base on the seabed it counts among the tallest mountains on Earth. Yet, it would still reach only a fraction of the Martian giant's height, and cover only a fraction of its breadth. Set the two side by side, and the earthly mountain becomes a foothill against the Martian peak. The biggest volcanic structures our world has ever raised would nestle comfortably on a single shoulder of Olympus Mons, lost against its immensity. It is not merely larger, it belongs to a different order of size altogether, a scale our planet has simply never reached. Even the broad volcanic regions of Earth gather their material more thinly than Mars does. On our restless world, the moving crust keeps spreading the volcanic wealth around, scattering it across chains and arcs and fields, so no single mountain can hoard it all. Mars, with its still and unbroken shell, let one place collect the fire of ages, drawing the outpourings of 100 million years and more into a single rising heap. The Martian giant is, in a sense, the natural answer to a single question. How high can one volcano grow when nothing ever moves it, and nothing ever stops it, when every drop of lava it ever made was added to the same one spot? It is the shape of unlimited patience, of fire returning forever to one unmoving place. Yet for all its supremacy, the mountain is gentle in form, which is part of why it surprises us. We expect the greatest mountain to be the steepest, the most fearsome, a jagged spire clawing at the sky, the kind of peak that must be conquered. Instead, the tallest peak in the solar system is a broad, low dome, sloping so softly you could hardly tell you were climbing it, more like a vast, shallow hill than a horn of rock. Its grandeur lies not in sharpness but in spread, not in menace but in calm vastness. It does not loom or threaten, it simply lies there, enormous and low. The largest volcano we know wears its crown like a wide sleeping creature rather than a blade of stone. There is a lesson in that softness perhaps, that true greatness need not be sharp or loud. Stand on its summit and even the planet's curve would feel different. Because Olympus Mons is so tall and so wide, from its peak you would be lifted well above the surrounding ground, with most of the thin air left behind below you, and the horizon would bow gently away on all sides. On a smaller world, the horizon already curves more sharply than on Earth, and lifted so high upon this great dome you would feel that curve all the more, the land falling away in every direction into the dusty distance. You would sense, more than on almost any mountain, that you stood upon a sphere, a small figure perched atop a rounding world, the slope dropping off below and the dark sky pressing close above. The mountain raises any imagined traveller not just into the thin air, but into a clearer feeling of being on a planet, alone and high, with the cosmos all around. It is a vantage made for awe and for stillness. The hollow at the top deserves a second, slower look. That summit complex of pits, where the ground once dropped away, is itself larger than many whole volcanoes on Earth. A single one of its overlapping craters could swallow a sizable earthly mountain entire. The whole peak lowered into that one depression and lost from sight beneath the rim. The emptiness it leaves set upon our own world would itself be reckoned a mighty landmark, a feature to travel to and marvel at. Here it is merely a dent in the crown of something far larger. The mountain's mere absences, the hollows where rock fell away and never returned, are themselves of a scale that humbles the imagination. The great wall that rings its base has no real parallel on Earth either. Few earthly features so completely encircle a mountain in a single high edge. A continuous outward-facing cliff marking where the volcano stops and the plains begin. On our world, the foot of a mountain usually slopes away gently, blurring into the land around it. Here, instead, the flank ends in a clean steep drop, as though the whole giant had been set down upon the plain as a separate thing. To travel along the foot of that wall would be to walk for thousands of kilometres around the mountain's perimeter, the cliff rising sheer on one side, the open plain falling away on the other. It is a boundary written large, a clear edge to one of the largest structures in the solar system. Even the mountain's borders run vast beyond easy telling. All these features together, the soft slopes, the sunken summit, the ringing wall, the immense breadth, make Olympus Mons a thing that lives most comfortably in the imagination, too large to be taken in all at once by any single eye. It can only be assembled in the mind, piece by piece, the way you have been doing tonight, building a calm picture of something that overflows every ordinary frame. There is rest in that kind of building, in holding a vastness easily in thought, without strain, letting the great shape form softly behind closed eyes. The very existence of Olympus Mons tells us that Mars was once intensely volcanic. That deep heat surged through it and broke the surface again and again, pouring out enough molten rock in this one place alone to raise a mountain the size of a country. A planet that can build such a thing is a planet with a fiery heart, a world that once churned and melted and remade itself across ages, its interior hot enough to keep the fires rising for a very long time. So the giant is not only a wonder in itself, but a message, a record left in stone for anyone who comes after to read, telling plainly that here, long ago, a world burned brightly from within and laid down its strength in the open for all the ages to see. That inner heat has faded now, but it has not vanished entirely. Mars still holds warmth deep in its core, and faint signs suggest that some slow geological stirrings may continue even today, gentle tremors and quiet shifts in the deep rock. A lander set down on the Martian plains carried an instrument so sensitive it could feel motions finer than the width of an atom, and over its long watch it registered many hundreds of Marsquakes, soft seismic murmurs rising from within the planet, most of them far too faint for any standing person to notice. Some seem to come from a region where the crust may yet be cracking and shifting, the distant echoes of a world not entirely quiet within. So even now, beneath the cold dust and the sleeping volcanoes, Mars stirs a little, ever so slightly, in the deep dark of its interior. Those Marsquakes are gentle things, mostly small tremblings that a careful instrument can feel, but a standing person likely could not. They travel through the planet's body, and the way they travel reveals what they pass through, for the waves bend and slow and quicken depending on the rock they cross, and some kinds of wave will not pass through liquid at all. By listening to how they move and how they echo back from the boundaries deep inside, scientists have begun to map the hidden interior of Mars, its core and mantle and crust, much as a doctor listens through the body to sense the shape of what lies within, or as one might judge the inside of a sealed vessel by the sound it makes when tapped. In this way, the planet's faint inner stirrings have become a tool for understanding it, each soft quake a whisper about what lies beneath. Even the slightest movements of so quiet a world can teach us, if we listen patiently enough across the dark. The crust of Mars, the outer shell on which Olympus Mons rests, is thicker on the whole than Earth's, a sturdy lid over the warmth below, and thicker still beneath the old southern highlands than beneath the low northern plains. This thickness is part of why the planet's volcanism slowed, and why its surface has held so still. A thicker crust is harder for the heat to break through, so over time the rising warmth found it more and more difficult to reach the surface, and the great eruptions grew rarer, and at last the mountains fell quiet, their vents sealed beneath the cooling stone. The very strength of the Martian shell helped close the planet's fires away, letting giants like Olympus Mons settle into their long sleep beneath an ever-cooling sky. And resting on so firm and unmoving a lid, the great volcano had the steadiest of foundations on which to pile its weight, age after age. Deep below that crust lies the Martian mantle, a vast layer of warm rock that creeps and shifts over the ages, and below that a core of metal, likely iron mixed with lighter elements, beginning perhaps halfway down toward the planet's centre. From the listening of those faint Mars quakes, scientists have come to believe the core is surprisingly large for so small a world, and at least partly molten even now, a great sphere of liquid metal turning in the dark. It was from the mantle above it that the heat once rose to feed the great volcano, plumes of warmth ascending through the rock toward the surface like deep currents in a thick sea. The mountain is, in this sense, the visible tip of a hidden process, the surface mark of forces working far down in the planet's depths. What shows as a mountain is the outermost trace of a long, slow exchange between the planet's heart and its skin. That conversation has grown soft and slow as Mars has cooled across the ages. A smaller world than Earth, Mars holds less heat within and loses what it has more readily into the cold of space, so its inner fires have dimmed faster than our own planet's, its great engine winding down sooner. The grand age of Martian volcanism has largely passed, leaving behind these silent monuments to a more active youth, mountains built when the world still had the strength to build them. Olympus Mons stands now as a relic of that warmer time, a cooling giant atop a cooling world, the two of them easing together toward an ever deeper rest. There is something restful in that shared cooling, like a fire that has done its work and now glows low and red in the hearth, no longer leaping, asking nothing more of itself, simply warm and quiet as the room grows still around it. Water shapes this story in quiet ways, or the memory of water does. Mars today is a dry world, its surface holding very little liquid, for the air is so thin and cold that liquid water can scarcely exist there in the open. It would freeze or hiss away into vapour almost at once. Most of the planet's moisture is locked away instead as ice in the polar caps or hidden frozen beneath the ground, vast stores of it buried in the soil. Yet water lingers near Olympus Mons in subtle forms. Those pale clouds that drape the mountain's flanks are made of water ice, tiny frozen crystals adrift in the thin air. So even on the slopes of a great volcano, in a desert of rust, the presence of frozen water still gathers, forming and fading like a faint cool breath. Long ago, when Mars ran younger and warmer, water may have played a larger role across the planet, perhaps even near the great volcanoes themselves. Where heat from rising magma met underground ice, there might once have been steam, or warm springs, or slow seeps of liquid water moving through the rock, pockets of warmth and wet in an otherwise frozen world. On Earth, such places, where volcanic heat meets water deep underground, are among the settings where life clings on in the dark without any sunlight at all, drawing its living from heat and chemistry alone. So some scientists wonder, very softly, whether the simplest life might once have found a similar foothold beneath a Martian mountain. No one knows. It is only a gentle possibility, a question hanging in the cold air around the slopes. The idea of life on Mars has long drawn the human heart, and Olympus Mons sits at the centre of a world that has inspired countless such dreams. We do not know whether anything ever stirred in the Martian dust, near the mountain or anywhere else. Rovers have sifted the soil and studied the rocks, and have found the old chemistry of a once wetter world, the kinds of minerals that form in water, the ingredients from which life is built. But of life itself, past or present, no clear sign has yet appeared, only the bare, beautiful geology of a quiet planet. Yet the question stays open and lovely, an unanswered softness at the edge of all our looking. Perhaps Mars was always lifeless. Perhaps it once held the faintest spark, long since gone. Either way, the mountain stands serenely above the mystery, neither confirming nor denying, simply enduring. If life never arose there, that too has a strange beauty, the beauty of a pure landscape untouched by any living thing, a world of stone and dust and ice and silence, shaped only by heat and gravity and time, with no footprint, no leaf, no track, no nest, no breath of any creature across all its billions of years. Nothing has ever grown on those slopes or crossed them. No root has split that rock. No tide has worn it. No eye has looked out from it upon its own world. Olympus Mons would then be the masterpiece of a lifeless artistry, the grandest sculpture in a gallery with no visitors, made by no hand and admired by no eye until ours at last turn toward it across the dark. There is a clean, cool peace in imagining such a place, so utterly still, so free of striving, simply being beautiful for no reason, and no one. At the poles, far from the great mountain, vast caps of frozen water and frozen carbon dioxide grow and shrink with the long Martian seasons, breathing slowly across the years. In the deep cold of winter, so much carbon dioxide freezes out of the thin air onto the winter pole that the planet's whole atmosphere thins measurably, only to thicken again as that frozen layer turns back to gas in the returning sun. The caps spread in winter and retreat in summer, and in that slow pulse the whole planet trades gases and moisture with its frozen reservoirs, the very air swelling and easing like a slow, year-long breath. Olympus Mons stands far from these icy crowns, yet it shares their world, their rhythm, their slow turning through the long Martian year. The mountain and the ice caps are distant kin, fellow features of one cold planet. Sometimes, when conditions are right, frost itself settles even on the lower Martian ground, a thin white rime forming in the coldest hours and vanishing as the faint day warms. Some of it is water frost, and some is frozen carbon dioxide, the same substance as dry ice, settling out of the air as a pale coating and then turning straight back to vapour in the morning sun without ever melting. Long ago, a lander in the northern plains watched just such a thin frost gather on the ground around it, through the cold of the Martian winter. Across much of Mars, in the deep chill of certain mornings, a delicate layer can dust the rocks and soil, a fleeting brightness that comes and goes with the temperature, decorating the red world for a little while with a touch of white. Even a planet so dry knows these small bright moments. The cycle of frost forming and fading, of clouds gathering and thinning, of ice caps breathing with the seasons, gives Mars a slow vitality, even in its dryness. Olympus Mons presides over all of it, the great unmoving centre around which these delicate cycles turn, the still point in a slowly breathing world. There is comfort in that image of a steady mountain amid soft recurring change, an anchor of permanence beneath the drifting clouds and the coming and going of the frost. To know all of this has taken an extraordinary human effort, and the wonder of what that effort revealed is its own kind of marvel. To understand Olympus Mons, people have built machines and flung them across the void, have written equations and read faint signals, have spent careers gazing at pictures of a mountain none of them will ever climb. Out of all that labour has come a portrait so detailed we can speak of the mountain's slopes and summit, as if we had walked there, though no one ever has. It is a triumph of curiosity, of the slow work of wanting to understand. The instruments that map the mountain are marvels of delicacy themselves, gathering faint light and faint echoes from far away. A laser altimeter sends out pulses of light 10 times a second, and times their return to measure height to within a few meters across an entire planet, drawing the contours of Olympus Mons with extraordinary care. Cameras capture the surface in many colours, even in light beyond what human eyes can see, in the infrared and beyond, so that the very minerals of the rock can be read from orbit by the particular shades they reflect. Still other instruments sound the ground with radar, peering a little way beneath the dust to sense the buried layers below. Each tool listens in its own way to the silent mountain, translating its shape and substance into numbers and images that travel home across the dark. From those measurements, scientists have built three-dimensional models, virtual versions of Olympus Mons that can be turned and viewed from any angle, flown over and explored within a computer. By stretching real photographs over the measured shape of the land, they can render views so lifelike that one seems to be soaring low over the slopes in a small aircraft, the ground rising and falling below in true proportion. In these quiet simulations, you can drift above the great caldera, glide down the long slopes, and trace the ringing wall at the base, all without leaving Earth. The mountain that no human has touched can be visited, in a sense, in the soft glow of a screen, its every contour faithfully rendered from the steady observations of orbiting craft. It is a strange and lovely thing to wander a Martian mountain from a chair in a quiet room. These models help researchers understand how the mountain formed and how it might behave, testing ideas about its eruptions and its slow growth against the careful measurements of its shape. By comparing the virtual mountain to what is known of shield volcanoes on Earth, of how their lavas flow and how their slopes are built, scientists tease out the story of how this far greater giant came to be, what kinds of lava built it, how thickly each flow was laid, how long the whole work took, why it grew so very large where the volcanoes of Earth stayed small. The mountain becomes a subject of gentle inquiry, a puzzle assembled slowly from evidence, each new measurement fitting softly into a growing understanding, each question answered raising another, milder one. There is peace in that careful, unhurried building of knowledge, a quiet image of how the mind can work without strain, gathering a little at a time and never forcing. What all this study reveals in the end is not only facts about a mountain, but a deeper sense of our place among the worlds. To know that such a giant stands on Mars is to feel the solar system grow larger and stranger, and more wonderful, full of mountains beyond our own, of canyons deeper than ours, of scales beyond our usual reckoning. For so long, the only mountains anyone could measure were the mountains of Earth, and they seemed the whole of what a mountain could be. Now we know they were only the near examples, and that other worlds keep their own, greater and stranger. Earth is not the measure of all things. The universe is wider in its making than any single planet would suggest. In that widening there is a soft humility, a gentle smallness that feels not frightening but freeing, the relief of being one small part of something vast and kind. There is a strange beauty in how light and shadow play across the great mountain through the slow Martian day. As the small sun moves across the pink sky, the long ridges and old lava channels of Olympus Mons throw shadows that stretch and shift, drawing changing patterns across the dusty slopes. In the low light of early morning, the shadows reach far, painting the mountain in deep contrasts of light and dark, every wrinkle of stone picked out by the slanting sun, every channel and ledge edged in shade. It is in just that low light, when the shadows are longest, that the features of the slope show most clearly, which is why those who map the mountain often prize the images caught near dawn or dusk. As the sun climbs toward noon, the shadows shrink and gather close, and the slopes flatten into a paler, more even glow. The mountain is forever being redrawn by the moving light, a vast sundial of stone. The summit caldera holds shadow in a special way. Its inner walls and steps catch the sunlight at different angles, so that parts of the great hollow lie in shade while others glow in the light, the whole basin a slow theatre of brightness and dark. In the early day, the eastern wall throws a long shadow across the floor, the western wall blazing bright above it. By afternoon, the shadows have crossed to the other side, and the eastern wall takes its turn in the sun. As the day turns, the line between light and shadow creeps across the caldera floor, lighting one terrace and then the next, tracing the shape of the ancient collapses in moving light. To watch that slow crossing would be to see the mountain's deep past gently lit and unlit, hour by unhurried hour, a record of old fires read out in light and shade. Because Mars carries only a thin atmosphere, the shadows there fall sharper and the contrast cleaner than on Earth. On our world, thick air scatters the sunlight everywhere, throwing a soft glow even into the shade, so that shadows are gentle and greyed at the edges. With so little air on Mars to scatter the light, the shadowed regions stay deep and crisp, and the sunlit slopes glow clearly against them, the line between light and dark drawn fine and sharp. The mountain's features stand out with a stark, quiet beauty, every ridge and channel keenly edged in light and shade. There is a clarity to the Martian landscape, a clean, dry definition, as if the whole world were drawn with a fine and careful hand. That crispness has its own kind of calm, a clean simplicity restful to the eye. When the sun has set, the mountain falls into a deep darkness, lit only by the stars and by the small, swift moons of Mars. For Mars has 2 tiny moons, little more than captured lumps of rock, and they cross the night sky in their own quick rhythms, casting only the faintest glimmers. Under their dim light, and the bright spill of stars in the thin air, Olympus Mons rests in a profound, cold darkness, its great bulk a deeper shadow against the starlit sky. The night on the mountain runs vast and very dark, a perfect stillness wrapped in faint starlight. Those 2 moons keep their own peculiar habits. The larger one circles Mars so closely and so quickly, completing an orbit in less than a third of a Martian day, that it rises in the west and sets in the east, crossing the whole sky 2 or 3 times between one sunrise and the next, a small swift point of light hurrying overhead while the stars wheel the other way. The smaller, more distant one moves at a gentler pace, drifting across the heavens in a slow arc, taking the better part of 3 days to cross from one horizon to the other. Neither is round and grand like our own moon. Both are small, dark, lumpy things, only a few kilometers across, more like drifting boulders or potatoes of rock than true moons, most likely stray bodies the planet captured long ago. Yet they keep their faithful orbits, crossing and recrossing the dark above the great summit. The closer of the 2 is very slowly drawing nearer to Mars over vast stretches of time, its orbit tightening across millions of years. In the very distant future, far beyond any human concern, it may draw close enough to break apart, perhaps forming a faint ring around the planet for a while, or falling at last to the surface. But all of that lies unimaginably far ahead, a slow fate unfolding over timescales that dwarf even the age of the mountain. For now, the little moon simply circles swift and silent, untroubled by its far-off destiny. From the summit of Olympus Mons, lifted so high above the plains, the view of those moons and stars would be especially clear, the thin air thinner still at such a height. The stars would shine with a steady, unwinking light, undimmed by the faint dust below, and the 2 moons would trace their paths against a deep, dark sky. To stand there in the Martian night would be to feel almost suspended among the stars, the ground falling away beneath, the cosmos open and close at once. It is a place made for stargazing, for quiet wonder at the night, a high balcony at the edge of a world. and the stars themselves seen from Mars would be much the same constellations you know, for the distances between the stars are so unthinkably vast that the small step from Earth to Mars, great as it feels to us, hardly shifts their patterns at all. The same familiar shapes would wheel slowly overhead, the hunter and the bears and the bright lone stars of winter, the same distant suns in the same arrangements, only viewed from a different, redder ground beneath a thinner air. There is comfort in that constancy, in the thought that the night sky over Olympus Mons holds the very same figures you might trace from your own window or backyard. The stars are a shared inheritance across the worlds, the same quiet lights shining down on Mars and Earth alike, on the great mountain and on you, here, now in the dark. So the mountain knows both day and night, both the long golden hush of the small sun's light and the deep dark beneath the stars and moons. It turns through these slowly, faithfully as Mars carries it through each long day, the light coming and going, the shadows reaching and shrinking, the stars wheeling overhead. Let that ancient rhythm carry you now, the great calm turning of light to dark, toward your own deep night. Olympus Mons is so large that it forms a noticeable feature of Mars seen from space, a great bump on the planet's western face, visible even in views of the whole globe. When spacecraft photograph the full disk of Mars from afar, the bulge of the volcanic region, with Olympus Mons among it, can be made out as a distinct swelling, a place where the planet's smooth roundness rises into a raised province. The mountain is large enough to alter the silhouette of an entire world. To change the shape of a planet even slightly is a measure of true vastness. Most mountains, even great ones on Earth, are far too small to change how their planet looks from space. Our own world appears a smooth blue sphere from afar, its peaks invisible at such a distance. But Mars carries its volcanic giants so prominently that they show in its global portrait, the planet visibly swollen where the fires once built. Olympus Mons and its kin are not mere wrinkles on the Martian face, but features grand enough to mark the whole world's form. The mountain is, in a sense, planetary in scale, a feature of the globe itself. The region it belongs to sits near the planet's equator, straddling the line where Mars is warmest and where the sun passes most directly overhead. So the mountain stands in the planet's gentle middle latitudes, where the temperatures, while still bitterly cold by our measures, are among the mildest on Mars, and where day and night fall into a steadier balance through the year. The great volcano keeps to the warm waste of the world, that broad central band far from the icy poles, where the swing of the seasons is gentler and the deep polar freezing never reaches. Some have wondered whether this warm equatorial belt, milder and less harsh than the rest, might one day be the easiest ground for visitors from Earth to settle. It is a place of relative balance, the steady middle of a tilted, turning planet. That equatorial setting means the sun passes high over Olympus Mons, climbing steeply into the sky each Martian noon before sinking again, near enough to straight overhead through much of the year. The mountain receives the most direct light the planet has to offer, the small sun arcing high above its summit, pouring its faint warmth most fully onto the slopes. Yet even this most direct sunlight stays gentle on Mars, the sun being so distant and the air so thin to hold any heat. So the noon over Olympus Mons is a soft, pale brightness, rather than a harsh glare, and the ground that warms a little in the daytime gives that warmth straight back to space the moment the sun is gone. It is a quiet noon, a mild, high light, falling on a mountain too cold to ever truly warm. The contrast is strange and gentle, a high bright sun above a frozen dusty land. Across the planet from the great volcanoes on the far side of Mars, the surface tells a different story, older and more battered, scarred with countless craters from the early bombardment of the solar system's youth. The two faces of Mars differ so markedly that they almost seem to belong to separate worlds. The southern hemisphere stands higher, rough and heavily cratered, its crust thick and old. The northern lies lower and smoother, a broad sunken plain. The boundary between them runs most of the way around the planet, a great divide between the high old land and the low young one. This lopsidedness is among the deep puzzles of Mars, its origin still pondered, whether the work of one tremendous ancient impact or of slow churnings in the planet's interior. Olympus Mons sits firmly on the raised volcanic side, part of the grander half of a planet divided in two by some far-off cores. The mountain, then, is not just a feature on Mars, but a clue to the planet's whole character, a piece of the larger story of how this world came to be. Its size speaks of long volcanism. Its placement speaks of the planet's divided face. Its preserved slopes speak of the slow, dry quiet that now reigns. To understand Olympus Mons is to understand a great deal about Mars itself, for the mountain is woven deeply into the planet's history and form. It is a single feature that opens onto the whole world, a doorway through which the entire story of Mars can be glimpsed. Olympus Mons could not exist as it does on any other planet we know. It is the child of Mars specifically, of its still crust, its lower gravity, its long volcanic youth, its slow cooling. The mountain and the planet belong to each other, shaped together by the same deep forces across the same vast time. The two are inseparable, a world and its peak, bound in one long story. Hold both at once now, the great red planet and the great mountain upon it, slowly turning in the dark of space, the rusty globe with its towering volcano, lit faintly by a distant sun, circled by two small moons. It is a serene and stately image, a whole world and its highest point, drifting peacefully through the long night of space. The long journeys that have carried our machines to Mars ask for patience of their own. A spacecraft bound for the red planet does not fly in a straight line, but follows a long curving path through space, looping outward from Earth's orbit toward the orbit of Mars, coasting silently for many months across the void. The craft is flung forward by its rockets, and then simply drifts, falling along a careful curve calculated to bring it to Mars at just the right moment. It is a slow voyage, a half-year or more of coasting through the dark, before the distant world finally swells into view. During that long crossing, the spacecraft travels through near-perfect emptiness, with little around it but the faint light of the distant sun and the cold dark of space. It carries its instruments carefully, its cameras and sensors waiting in the cold, all aimed toward the work ahead. Inside that small machine sleeps the potential for great discovery, dormant until arrival, drifting steadily toward the mountain and the planet it has come to study. There is something quietly heroic in that long, lonely coasting, a small craft crossing an immense gulf in silence, faithful to its distant goal. When at last it nears Mars, the craft must slow itself and settle into orbit, a delicate maneuver carried out across millions of kilometers, far too distant for anyone on Earth to steer in the moment, so the craft must do it alone, by instructions written long in advance, while those who built it can only wait through the long minutes for word that all has gone well. It fires its engines, or grazes the very top of the atmosphere again and again to shed its speed a little at a time, easing into a looping path round the red world, where it will circle for years, gazing down. From that orbit it begins its long watch, passing over Olympus Mons again and again, photographing and measuring the great mountain on each slow circuit. The long voyage gives way to a patient vigil. Some craft circle Mars in low, fast orbits, sweeping close over the surface and catching fine detail. Others ride higher, slower paths, taking in broad regions at a glance. Some pass over the same ground at the same hour each time, so the lighting matches and changes can be compared. Others drift across all hours of the day, catching the land in every shade of morning and evening. Together, a fleet of such orbiters has built up over the years an ever richer portrait of the planet and its giant mountain, each adding its own view, its own measurements, its own contribution to the whole. The skies of Mars now hold several of these faithful watchers, circling endlessly, sending home their findings, a small constellation of human-made companions keeping watch over a world. Across many seasons they have traced the clouds gathering and fading on the mountain's flanks, the frost coming and going, the light shifting across the slopes, learning not just how the great volcano looks, but how it changes through the long Martian year. In time, perhaps, people themselves may travel to Mars and stand at last upon its surface, though likely not upon the great mountain, which stays too vast and high for easy reach, and whose summit lies in air too thin to give much help to anything that flies. If they do come, they will find a world already known in part, its features mapped, its mountain charted, its slow rhythms understood, its weather and its dangers studied for many years in advance. They will arrive not into total mystery, but into a place prepared by long looking, made a little familiar by all the long watching that came before, so that the first human eyes to see Olympus Mons in person will already half remember it. And the great calm peak will be there to greet them on the horizon, rising as it always has from the red plains, exactly as the long years of watching had promised it would. Down on the surface itself, the silence runs almost absolute. Mars is a profoundly quiet world, and on the slopes of Olympus Mons there is little to make a sound and little air to carry it. When a lander on the Martian plains once turned on a small microphone, what it caught was a thin, low murmur of wind and almost nothing else, the faintest breath of a sound across an immense emptiness. There are no animals, no flowing water in most places, no leaves to rustle, no engines, no voices, nothing to break the hush. The mountain rests in a stillness so complete that it is almost a presence in itself, a deep enveloping quiet filling the whole landscape, the kind of silence that seems to have a weight and a shape of its own. In that thin air, even the Martian wind makes little sound. On Earth, wind whistles and roars because the dense air carries the noise readily. On Mars, the sparse atmosphere can barely transmit it, and what sound does travel comes through muffled and faint, the higher notes fading fastest, so that any voice or footfall would sound thin and far off even up close. A strong gust on those slopes would be only a faint whisper, a soft sighing rather than a roar. The dust might shift and drift, the fine grains might be lifted and carried, yet all of it happens almost soundlessly, in a hush that swallows nearly every noise. The mountain's weather moves without a murmur, its clouds forming silently, its dust drifting without a sound. It is a world of motion without much sound. That deep quiet is partly why the Martian landscape feels so timeless. With so little sound, so little change from moment to moment, the mountain seems to exist outside of time, in an unbroken calm. Nothing rushes, nothing clamours, nothing hurries across those slopes. A single moment there might feel like any other. The same hush holding steady across hours and days and years, and across thousands of years, and across far longer still, the scene barely altering from one age to the next. To imagine standing in that silence is to feel the noise of your own world fall away, the traffic and the voices and the constant low hum of a living planet, leaving only a clean, deep, restful quiet, the kind you rarely know on Earth, where there is almost always some sound somewhere, however faint. The mountain silence and the quiet of your room can blend, the wide hush of Mars folding into the smaller hush around you, the great distant calm and the near small one becoming a single stillness, until the two feel almost the same. The deep quiet of that silent mountain on its silent world can be your quiet too, slow and easy, here in the dark. Even the dust in that silence moves with a dreamlike slowness. When the thin wind lifts the fine red powder, it rises gently, drifting and settling in slow, soft motions, with no sound to mark its passing. Whole seasons of dust may shift across the slopes this way, the fine grains travelling slowly, redistributing themselves across the land, smoothing some features and revealing others. It is a silent reshaping, the mountain surface gently rearranged by the soundless drift of dust across the ages. Nothing about it is sudden, All of it is soft and slow. Sometimes, across the whole of Mars, great dust storms rise, lifting fine powder high into the thin air and spreading it over much of the planet. These storms can grow large, and now and then, in certain years, one swells until it covers the entire globe, wrapping all of Mars in haze for weeks or even months at a time, dimming the sun to a faint disk and tinting the whole sky a deeper red. Yet even such a planet-swallowing storm moves with a strange gentleness, for the thin air, while it can lift and carry the fine dust, has little force behind it. The winds, though they may travel fast, push so feebly against anything solid that a person standing in one would feel only the lightest pressure, less than a gentle breeze on Earth. So a Martian dust storm, for all its size, is more a slow veiling of the world than a violent tempest, a gradual dimming rather than a furious blast. When such a storm passes over Olympus Mons, it may wrap the great mountain in a haze of suspended dust, blurring its outline, hiding its summit. Then, as the storm settles, the slopes reappear, and a fresh, thin layer of powder coats them, subtly changing their colour and texture. It was just such a storm that first hid and then revealed the mountain to our earliest close cameras, the summit poking through the murk before the full giant emerged. So the dust, like the light and the frost and the faint clouds, weaves its thread through the story, drifting and settling, veiling and revealing, slowly reshaping the great slopes in near-perfect silence. Season after season it lifts and falls and lifts again, softening every edge, the whole mountain dressed and redressed in fine red powder across the long unhurried ages. Mars is a world of remarkable variety, holding within its single red surface an extraordinary range of country, more kinds of landscape than its small size might lead you to expect. There are the towering volcanoes, the deep and branching canyon systems, the vast cratered plains, the layered polar caps of ice, the windswept dune fields, the jumbled chaos terrains, and the ancient dried channels where water may once have run. For all that it is a desert, frozen and still, it is far from a blank or featureless place. It is richly varied, a single planet holding many different kinds of stillness, many different faces of quiet. And Olympus Mons rises above this whole diverse landscape as its highest point, its crowning feature, the summit of an entire world. The dune fields are themselves a quiet marvel, vast stretches of rippling sand shaped slowly by the thin winds into long, graceful waves. These dunes can be dark, made of fine grains of ground basalt rather than the pale sand of an earthly desert, lying in elegant crescent shapes and long parallel ridges across the floors of craters and the broad lowlands. They march slowly over time, grain by grain, the thin winds nudging the sand into ever-changing arrangements, the whole field creeping across the ground over the years in a procession too slow for any eye to catch. Far from the great mountain, these dark sand seas ripple in silence, another expression of the same unhurried forces that built and weathered Olympus Mons itself. The ancient channels tell a more wistful story, of a time when water may have carved its way across the surface, cutting valleys and branching networks into the rock. Some wind in delicate tree-like patterns, the way a river on earth gathers its tributaries. Others are broad and deep, scoured all at once, it is thought, by sudden enormous floods that burst from beneath the ground and then drained away and never returned. These dry riverbeds wind across parts of the planet, frozen records of long vanished flows, hinting at a wetter, gentler past. To trace them is to imagine water moving where now there is only dust, rivers running under a thicker sky long ago. Olympus Mons stood through those wetter ages too, a great mountain perhaps once watching distant waters flow, now presiding over a world gone dry, holding the memory of a different Mars. The cratered highlands of the southern hemisphere preserve the oldest face of the planet, a surface battered by the heavy impacts of the solar system's early days, when stray rocks were far more numerous and the young worlds were pelted hard, again and again, by the rubble of their own making. These ancient highlands are rough and pockmarked, a landscape of craters set within craters, the marks overlapping so thickly that scarcely any smooth ground remains, telling of a long, violent youth now past. Yet they too lie quiet now. The great bombardment ended ages ago, the old craters softened by the slow drift of dust. They are the planet's elder regions, its weathered old face, set against the younger, smoother volcanic plains where Olympus Mons rises. Mars wears both its youth and its age upon its single surface. The polar caps, those crowns of ice at the top and bottom of the world, hold their own slow beauty, layered deposits of ice and dust built up across countless seasons, stacked band upon band like the growth rings within an ancient tree. These layers record the planet's climate history, each thin stratum laid down in a different age under a slightly different sky, so that reading down through them is reading back through time, season by season, epoch by epoch. The caps grow and shrink with the seasons, breathing slowly across the Martian year, vast frozen reservoirs of water ice and dry ice together, holding more water, it is thought, than all the rest of the planet's surface combined. Far from the equatorial mountain, they cap the world in white, a cold, quiet counterpoint to the great rusty volcano of the warmer middle latitudes. So let the mind wander softly across that whole world for a moment, from the great mountain to the deep canyons, from the dune fields to the icy poles, taking in the full sweep of Martian geography in one drowsy thought. It is a large and varied and beautiful place, this red planet holding the dramatic and the gentle all at once, towering peaks and deep chasms and soft dunes and quiet ice, all resting under the same thin pink sky, all wrapped in the same long silence. It rests now in your imagination, peaceful and complete, the whole red world turning slowly in the dark with Olympus Mons rising at its heart. The mountain's true size rewards a slower, more careful look, for the mind can hardly grasp such scale at once, and must come at it from many easy angles. Its base is so broad that, set upon Earth, it would stretch across a vast region, covering far more ground than any earthly mountain's footprint. Its breadth, even more than its height, may be its most staggering quality. A volcano not just tall, but immensely, almost impossibly wide. To walk all the way around the foot of Olympus Mons, along the base of its ringing wall, would be a journey of thousands of kilometers, longer than crossing many countries. The circumference is so great that to circle it on foot would take weeks of steady walking, around and around the vast perimeter, the slopes always rising on one side, the plains always falling away on the other. Few features anywhere demand such a journey simply to walk around them. It is less a peak to be climbed than a small continent to be circled, a great rounded land unto itself. To climb from the base to the summit, though the slope is gentle, would be a journey of immense length, for the mountain is so broad that even its shallow incline stretches on for hundreds of kilometers from edge to top. You would walk and walk across the tilted plain, gaining height so gradually as to hardly notice, the summit always far ahead, the base falling slowly behind. It would take days, perhaps many days, to make that long ascent, a climb measured not in steep struggle but in patient distance. The mountain's gentleness only makes its size more apparent. A slope so soft must be vast to reach such height. Seen from the side, with nothing else for scale, you might not even recognize it as a mountain at all, so broad and low does it appear relative to its height. Spread across hundreds of kilometers, yet rising only 22, it has the proportions of a very wide, very shallow dome, far flatter than the steep peaks we usually picture. Only its true measurements reveal its grandeur. To the eye it might seem almost modest in its sloping. The mountain hides its scale in its shape, a giant disguised as a wide, soft rise upon the land. The volume of rock inside it runs correspondingly immense, a quantity of stone so vast it is hard to express. All the lava that built it, poured out over hundreds of millions of years, has gathered into a structure containing an enormous bulk of rock, far exceeding any single volcano on Earth. To imagine all those countless flows layered one upon another into a single mountain is to imagine an outpouring of material on a planetary scale. And it happened with no rush at all, each thin layer added slowly, the great dome swelling upward and outward across millions of years so gradually that across any single human lifetime it would have seemed perfectly unchanging. Its immensity is the gift of deep time, of slow accumulation beyond imagining, of fire returning again and again to the same quiet spot. Hold that scale softly now, not as a number to be grasped, but as a feeling, something vast and gentle spread wide across a red plain beneath a distant sun, and let yourself sink a little further towards sleep as you cradle it. A gentle question rises softly now. What would it feel like simply to be there, standing on the slopes of the great mountain, were such a thing ever possible? The ground beneath would be firm and dusty, the fine red powder soft underfoot, perhaps yielding a little like packed snow, the solid basalt close below it. The gravity, only a third of Earth's, would make every movement lighter, every step a floating thing, the body buoyant and unburdened. A small push of the legs would carry you up and forward in a long, slow arc, and you would come down again unhurried, with time to spare before your foot met the dust. To walk there would be to move with a low, drifting grace, the limbs lighter, the steps slower and more dreamlike, an ease in every motion, as if the whole body had been gently unburdened of half its weight. The sky above would hang in that pale pink of the Martian day, soft and dusty, the small sun smaller than you know it, its light thin and kind. The air, far too thin to breathe, would be utterly still, with at most the faintest whisper of a breeze, barely felt. The silence would press close, broken by nothing, and all around the vast slope would stretch away in every direction, rising so gently that it would seem almost level, a tilted plain of red dust reaching toward a hazy horizon. To stand there would be to feel very small and very calm, alone in a wide, quiet, gently sloping world. The cold would wrap around you, deep and dry, a chill held steady across the slopes. Yet in imagination that cold need not bite. It can simply be a clean coolness, the crisp chill of a still world, the kind of cold that goes with silence and rest. Far overhead, the sky would shade from dusty pink near the ground toward a darker, deeper hue higher up, the thin air giving little of the bright blue dome an earthly sky throws over a clear day. You might look up and see pale wisps of cloud near the summit, faint and frost bright against that high, dark sky. You might see the small sun arcing slowly overhead, or at evening sinking into its cool halo. You might see at night the bright unwinking stars and the two little moons crossing the dark, one hurrying, one slow. And always, the vast slope of the mountain reaching away on every side, the largest mountain in all the worlds we know, holding you upon its immense and tender flank. The body, in that imagined low gravity, would feel light and unburdened, as if some of its weight had lifted away, leaving it floating gently, easily held. And here, in your own bed, the body can feel a little of that lightness too, the weight easing, the muscles releasing, the limbs growing soft and heavy and free all at once. Let yourself rest there, in imagination, on the great slopes of Olympus Mons, in the soft pink light and the deep silence and the gentle low gravity, far from all hurry and noise, with nowhere else to be and nothing at all to carry. From those slopes, the Earth itself would appear as only a small bright point in the Martian sky, a tiny blue-white star among the others, the whole of a home shrunk to a faint gleam low above the horizon at dawn or dusk. To stand on Olympus Mons and look back toward Earth would be to see everything familiar reduced to a single point of light, distant and quiet, rising and setting like a morning star, a companion to the two small moons. Every sea and city and crowd, every face you have ever known, all the hurry and noise and concern of an entire world, gathered into one soft point of light in a far-off sky, too small to show any feature at all. There is a deep peace in that perspective, in seeing how small and far the whole busy world becomes when it is viewed from the slopes of a distant mountain, just one more gentle light among the stars. That distance is no barrier to the mind, which can cross it in an instant, standing in imagination upon those slopes while the body rests quietly here in the dark. The mountain is far yet near in thought, remote yet held gently in the drowsing mind. Let the vast space between the worlds be a blanket of quiet around you, the great dark gulf a deep stillness holding you safe. Olympus Mons, ancient as it is, rests within a cosmos older still, and that vaster age has its own calm. The universe is some 3 times older even than the solar system that holds Mars and the Great Mountain, reaching back well over 13 billion years to a beginning almost beyond imagining. The atoms that make up the rock of the mountain were forged long ago, some in the hearts of ancient stars that lived their whole lives and died before the sun was ever born, scattering their substance into the dark to be gathered up again into new worlds. The mountain is built of that star stuff, of material shaped and reshaped across spans of time that dwarf even its own great age, old beyond the planet, old beyond the sun. The iron that reddens the Martian dust, the same iron that paints the slopes of Olympus Mons in rust, was made inside stars, in the deep furnaces of their cores, where lighter elements were fused into heavier ones across the long lives of those suns, and then scattered across space when the stars at last died, and threw their substance outward. Every atom of iron in that red dust was once at the heart of a star. So the warm colour of the great mountain traces back to the death of ancient suns, to the forging of metal in stellar fires long extinguished. The rust of Mars is in a sense the ash of old stars, the iron of dead suns rusting now on a distant slope. To stand upon Olympus Mons, even in imagination, is to stand upon the slowly gathered remnants of ancient stars, material older than the sun, shaped at last into a mountain. The sun that lights the great mountain is itself one star among hundreds of billions in our galaxy, an ordinary star neither large nor small, lying out toward the quiet edge of a great wheel of stars so wide that its light takes tens of thousands of years to cross from one side to the other, and that whole galaxy is only one among countless others scattered across the universe, more galaxies than there are grains in all the dust of Mars. Olympus Mons stands upon a planet circling one such ordinary star, a single mountain in a cosmos beyond all counting. From far enough away, the whole solar system would shrink into a single point of light, the great mountain utterly invisible, lost in the immensity. And yet, it is there, real and vast on its own scale, a giant by the measure of worlds, a tiny thing by the measure of the cosmos. Both are true at once, and both are calm, the great mountain serene in its own size, and serene in its smallness alike. Draw close again to the texture of the slopes, to the small details that make up the great dome. Across the flanks of Olympus Mons lie countless individual lava flows, each one a distinct sheet of stone, frozen where it cooled, overlapping and interlocking like shingles or like the long lobes of a slow flood. Some are smooth and broad, others are rougher, their surfaces broken into jumbled blocks where the crust shattered as it moved. Still others wrinkle into the fine ropey folds of the smoothest lava. You can often tell which flow came first and which came after, for the younger ones lie over the older, lapping across their edges. To look closely is to see a rich patchwork of these overlapping flows, stone laid down across the ages, each piece a separate moment of the mountain's long making, each a single eruption set down and left. Between and across these flows run channels and ridges, the paths where lava once flowed in confined streams, or where the cooling rock buckled and folded. Some channels lie like dry riverbeds of stone, the frozen courses where molten rock once ran swiftly down the slopes. Others are levees, the raised banks a lava river built along its own edges as it ran, just as a water river raises levees of mud, leaving the channel standing slightly above the ground around it once the flow drained away. Here and there the surface is marked by smaller features too, vents and pits and low domes where lava once welled up, and round hollows where the ground sank quietly over an emptied pocket below. Each one tells a small story of the fires that built the mountain, the fine grain of its long history etched across the vast slopes. Over all of it lies the fine red dust, softening every edge, filling the hollows, draping the whole surface in a thin reddish blanket. It gathers thickest in the sheltered low places and thins on the wind-scoured rises, so that the slopes are subtly shaded, lighter here and darker there, mapping where the dust has lain and where it has been swept away. Beneath the dust, the rock is sharp and detailed. Above it, all is rounded and muted by the powder. To imagine running a hand across that surface would be to feel the soft dust first, powdery and cool, drifting up in a faint cloud at the touch, and then, beneath it, the harder texture of the stone, the smooth ropey folds in one place, the rough broken blocks in another, every grain of it cold from the long Martian night. The mountain would feel both soft and hard at once, gentle and rugged together, the fine, cool powder yielding under the fingertips and the ancient stone unmoving just beneath, every grain of it chilled through by the long Martian night. In its quiet way, the mountain opens onto the deeper story of how planets themselves form and live and slowly grow still. Olympus Mons is a window into the inner life of a world, a visible expression of the heat and motion that once stirred deep within Mars. It was built by that inner heat rising to the surface, so to study it is to study the planet's hidden interior, the warmth and the slow currents of rock far below. The great volcano is the outward sign of an inward life. All rocky planets, Earth and Mars alike, are born hot, gathered from the swirling material of a young solar system, the heat of all that gathering and the decay of certain elements deep inside keeping their interiors molten for ages. While they are hot inside, they are volcanically alive, their inner heat breaking the surface, building mountains and reshaping the land. As they cool, that activity slows, the eruptions grow rare, the mountains fall quiet. And the size of a world governs how long this lasts. A larger planet with so much more inside it and proportionally less surface to lose heat through, holds its warmth longer and stays active longer, while a smaller one cools more quickly and grows still sooner, the way a small cup of tea cools faster than a great pot. Mars, a middle-sized world, smaller than Earth but larger than the Moon, had a long but finite volcanic youth, time enough to build its great mountains before its inner fires faded. Olympus Mons is the grandest product of that span, the peak that grew largest while Mars was warm. To understand Olympus Mons, then, is to understand something of the life cycle of planets, of how worlds are born hot and grow cool, how their volcanic activity rises and fades. Every rocky world has its own version of this tale. Our own Earth, still warm and restless within, building and reshaping its mountains even now. The small dead moon, long since gone cold and quiet, its face fixed for ages, and Mars between them, once vigorous, now settling towards stillness. Mars tells its version through Olympus Mons and its kin, a story of fire and long time written in great mountains across the red plains. It is, in the end, a gentle story, with no catastrophe in it, no sudden ending, only the long unfolding of a world's inner life and its slow settling into quiet. Mars built its great mountains and then grew still, its heat sinking deeper and dimmer, its surface easing into the deep calm it now holds, the day's labour of a whole planet drawing softly to its close. Follow that thought of rest down into the deepest layers, far below the great mountain, into the warm, quiet heart of Mars. Beneath the dusty surface and the cooled lava lies the crust, and beneath that the mantle, and at the very centre, a core of metal holding the last of the planet's first warmth. The core is thought to be largely iron, perhaps mixed with lighter elements, a dense heart at the centre of the world. Olympus Mons rests upon all of it, a great mountain atop a layered world, its roots reaching down toward the warm depths from which its lava once rose. Long ago, that core may have churned and flowed, generating a magnetic field that wrapped the whole planet, much as Earth's core does today. Such a field would have shielded Mars, deflecting some of the harsh radiation of space. But as the planet cooled, the churning seems to have slowed and stopped, and the global field faded away, leaving the surface largely unprotected, the bare slopes open to the sky. The deep iron heart of Mars grew quieter as the world cooled, its great current stilling, its field dimming into faint traces preserved in the ancient rock, a memory of magnetism locked in stone. So the picture forms of a whole planet settling slowly into rest, the cooled and thickened crust, the slowing mantle, the quieting core, the faded field, the warmth held deep within and only slowly seeping away. Mars is cooling from the inside out, as all small worlds do, growing calmer in its depths, its great age of inner activity gently passing, its heat not gone but sunk deep and sealed under stone. And Olympus Mons rests atop it all, the surface crown of a world easing into quiet, its slopes still, its old vents cold, its making long since finished. Let the thoughts sink down with the planet's heat, into that deep stillness, the warm quiet heart of Mars resting far below the great mountain, carrying you downward too toward your own deep rest, the warmth of waking easing, the mind sinking softly toward the still centre of sleep. Picture the mountain now as it might appear to a traveller approaching Mars from space, drawing slowly nearer across the dark. At first, from very far away, Mars would be only a small reddish point, a warm gleam among the stars brightening slowly as the distance closed. Then the point would swell into a small disk, a tiny red world hanging in the dark, and its surface markings would begin to show. The bright polar caps, the dark plains, the great volcanic rise with its mountains. There, on the western edge of that rise, the bulge of Olympus Mons would be made out, a great swelling on the planet's face, growing clearer as the world grew larger. Closer still, the summit complex would resolve into its nested pits and terraces, and the ringing wall would appear at the base, the rampart edging the giant. Lower yet, the long flanks would reveal their flows and channels, the patchwork of old lava, the soft red dust gathered in the hollows. From a low orbit, the mountain would stretch beneath the traveller in all its immensity, the slopes reaching away farther than the eye could follow, a whole landscape unto itself, too large to hold in one view, so that one would have to pass over it slowly, piece by piece, gathering it in a little at a time. There is no rush in that approach, only the slow, unhurried nearing, the mountain emerging gradually from the world below, drawing closer and clearer in the dim red light of a distant sun, with nothing to do but look, slowly, as it rises to fill the view. There is a deep comfort in how the great mountain endures, holding steady through every slow shift of its world. Across the long ages, Mars has cooled, its fires fading, its water freezing, its surface drying, yet through all of it, Olympus Mons has stood, vast and patient on its red plain. It has outlasted the planet's warm youth, its possible wet ages, its great age of volcanism, enduring as the world around it slowly changed and quieted. It has held its shape through the slow rain of small impacts, the drifting dust, the coming and going of countless storms, the freezing and thawing of frost across uncounted seasons, weathering only by the smallest degrees across the longest stretches of time, and the mountain will likely endure far into the future, lasting long past the day our own lives and labours fade, standing still on its red plain as the ages keep turning. Mars will go on cooling, its seasons cycling, its dust drifting, and Olympus Mons will stand through all of it, patient and vast, belonging to a timescale far beyond our own. There is a profound peace in that permanence, a fixed and faithful steadiness for the drowsing mind to lean on. Let it settle into you now, the calm of a thing that holds its shape across the ages, while everything around it gently shifts and stills as the breath grows slower, the body heavier, the thoughts more quiet. One of the most quietly profound thoughts comes last. Olympus Mons, this greatest of mountains, exists entirely without us, indifferent to whether anyone ever knows it at all. For billions of years it stood unseen, unnamed, uncontemplated by any mind, simply being, vast and quiet, on its distant plane. It did not need us to be magnificent. It was magnificent in the dark, in the silence, for ages before any eye turned toward it. Its grandeur is its own, complete in itself, asking nothing, needing nothing, present across the deep ages. There is a strange comfort in that, in the existence of such beauty entirely apart from us, lovely for no reason and no audience. The mountain stood serene and grand through all the ages before there were minds to know it, and it would stand just as grand if no mind ever knew it. Its beauty does not depend on being seen. Its vastness does not depend on being measured. It simply is. And yet, by some quiet chance it came to be known, reached across the dark by tireless machines and drawn into the circle of the known. So now it is both things at once, magnificent in itself, complete without us, and also held gently in the mind, a wonder come to be loved. It needs no keeping, for it is safe in itself, far beyond any harm or help. You may simply be glad of it, and let it be, complete and serene, on its distant plane. Through all of it, across the great slopes and the thin skies and the deep silence, across the long ages and the dark gulfs of space, one thing has held steady at the centre, the simple, profound fact that Olympus Mons exists at all, the greatest mountain in all the reaches anyone has come to know. That it is there, real and immense and quiet, is itself the final wonder, the deepest marvel of them all. Consider what it means that such a thing can be, that on a small red planet far across the dark, a single volcano could rise so high and spread so wide, built slowly across billions of years by patient fires on a still and unmoving crust, lifted by a gentle gravity into the thin pink sky. It means the universe is capable of such grandeur, such vast quiet beauty, in places no one ever sees. It means that wonder is woven into the very fabric of the worlds, that magnificence can rise in silence on a distant plane, asking nothing, simply being. And it means too that a small and brief mind can reach across the dark and hold so vast and ancient a thing, can stand in imagination upon a mountain it will never touch, can carry a whole distant world gently in thought. That meeting of the small mind and the great mountain, the bridging of an immense distance by quiet wonder, is itself a soft miracle. So let this be the last thought to hold, the simple, deep gladness that such a wonder exists, and that you have come to know it. A great mountain, vast and serene, at rest on rusty ground under a far and gentle star, the loftiest height in any region our looking has reached, holding steady through epoch after epoch, lovely all on its own, kept now softly in the drowsing mind. It needs nothing from you, and you may love it freely, lightly, with no burden, simply glad that it is there. The journey is complete now, and you have travelled far over those wide, gentle flanks, and through that rarefied air, through the long ages and the vast distances, all without leaving the quiet of your own resting place. You have gathered, along the way, 101 quiet wonders, and they rest now softly in the mind, asking nothing, needing nothing, simply present. And if you are still here, drifting at the edge of sleep, another quiet journey already waits nearby, there on the screen whenever you wish for it, or never at all, ready to carry you onward into wonder some other night, or simply to rest unused. There is nothing you must do. You do not need to hold on to any of it. The numbers, the names, the slopes and skies, and the great mountain itself may all drift gently away now, fading from the easing mind. What stays, stays. What fades, fades. And either way, all is well. You carried these wonders for a while, and they were lovely, and now you may set them all down, gently and simply rest. There is nothing left to remember, nothing left to do, only the soft quiet of the night and the gentle weight of your own resting body, sinking slowly into stillness. Let the breath grow slow now, soft and easy, each one a little gentler than the last. Let the body grow heavy, settling deeper into the quiet, every tension loosening, the arms and legs going soft and still. Let the thoughts slow and fade like fine powder, coming to rest on a distant incline, like clouds dissolving against a far-red peak. There is nothing to hold, nothing to chase, nothing to do but rest, here in the deepening quiet as the night folds gently around you. The great mountain rests on its distant plain, vast and quiet and serene, and you rest here, soft and quiet and at peace, both of you still now, both of you calm. Let its deep stillness be your stillness, its vast quiet your quiet, its gentle endurance your gentle rest. There is no hurry anywhere, no urgency at all, only the slow soft settling into sleep. Rest now. Let everything grow soft and still. Let the breath carry you gently down, slow and easy, into the deep quiet. Let the body sink into rest, heavy and warm and soft. Let the mind grow as still as the silent slopes of a distant mountain, calm and quiet and at peace. The night is deep and soft and kind. There is nothing more to do, nowhere to go, nothing to hold, only rest, only quiet, only the gentle deepening of sleep. And now, 101 wonders are resting with you. Sleep now. Good night.